Right, well, it's not the first time this word's been used today. It's also not the first time somebody said why, what and how. Paul's talk started with that caption as well. But I think we are, in this part of the day, talking about how the subject of digital built environment is moving on from being essentially BIM-centric. I've spent 7 years now trying to understand, explore and explain BIM to government and clients, and I've done 3 publications during that period. The last one, however, doesn't say BIM. Going Digital was produced for the UK BIM Alliance last October, and it answers some of the issues that came up this morning because it contains none of the jargon in the British standards. It uses all the familiar words that clients have used over the years because you don't need any of that new stuff. It only confuses. And it's probably, it also deals with this business of crossing the chasm between the early adopters and the mainstream client, and why that's such a big issue for the industry to get to those clients for whom BIM is a mystery, wrapped in an enigma. So we are moving on from a BIM-centric view of the built environment, but we need to go down quite a long path. The built environment is recognised now, particularly by the British government, as essentially the enabler of the whole rest of the economy and of the quality of life that we have. And I define the built environment as 3 related industries. The property industry in the sense of building owners and investors, the construction industry including design, and the facility management industry. Together, because they do overlap and it's jolly difficult to measure the total, but somewhere between 15 and 20% of gross domestic product is tied up in these 3 silos. They do overlap massively, but again, people don't seem to be aware of that. Half of everything constructed is actually repair, maintenance, and improvement. So what is facility management if it isn't repair, maintenance, and improvement? It's actually not separate to construction, but we'll come back to that point. The drive towards digital built Britain, it began in 2015 with a report that was done by University College for the BIM task group. That led to this changing definition from building information modelling to the idea of running the country through a digital parallel to the real world. And this preposterous idea, it seemed, of actually being able to simulate the way the country worked in lots of ways by adding up all of the facilities and systems that we have digitally and producing what was called a digital twin. You'll notice building information modelling runs along the bottom. This is the Cambridge Centre for Digital Built Britain, which was formed in 2017 and essentially set out on a path to enable us to design and build, operate the country through integrating our built environment with data. And essentially, the construction industry is the sort of bottom layer. We plan and brief, we design and build, but then somebody comes in and maintains and operates the facility that we build. Others actually use that building to deliver a service of some kind. And then we have the public at large using, either commercially or public purposes, the services that are being offered. Each one of them throws their stuff over the wall to the next one, and that's the way it has conventionally been. But now that sensors and analytics are cheap and cheerful, we can expect a huge amount of feedback from the way in which the public use things back towards the service provider, to the infrastructure, facility manager, and finally to the designers and constructors. At the same time, we're providing a lot of data that can flow forward to create management tools which would enable people to consciously optimize what's going on. This is utterly transformative because feedback has been the great impossible. Nobody ever talks about how buildings work. We're beginning to admit that they don't perform remotely as well as we said they should. But we didn't know that, and we didn't know how to control the process because we weren't getting information. We now can, and it's becoming cheap and cheerful. And so I think we can reconceptualize our entire view of what we're trying to do and how we do it. So coming back to the three mega silos of the built environment, property, construction, and facility management. They overlap. They're not just self-contained worlds. Property people run construction projects, and they also run properties which they create and sell. Half of all construction is repair and maintenance. And in the middle is design, professional services of one kind or another. These overlaps are really taken for granted, but also unexplored. And what is really intriguing is that each of these, why does slides never come out the way you put them in? Each of these silos has taken its own view of the way it's going to use technology. It's given it separate names and separate thoughts. And it's not a whole life process at all. For example, the construction world is largely using BIM, but it's also using reality capture, scanning, various other BIM-related, spatially related technologies. The property world uses what it calls prop tech. That's what that word ought to be at the top. It's nothing to do with Switzerland. That is a whole series of applications about buying and selling and marketing, but it also includes project management, which drastically overlaps with BIM. But what's really intriguing is the smart technology, which is what's at the center of the facilities management world now. The idea of a building which is aware of itself, can be managed through the sensors and analytics concept. That the world of facility managers is racing off down that track. They don't know about BIM. They don't see the point of it. And we don't know about smart. And smart technology is actually extremely powerful and is quite likely to make BIM seem like a sideshow if we're not very careful, because it can do a lot of the same things, but it has no spatial awareness. It can tell you who's in your building, but it can't tell you where spatially that is and what the properties of the room they're in is. And this is where this idea of a unifying model of the world comes in. Convergence of all of these forms of application into a digital representation of assets, which supports decision-making in design, construction, and operation. And I do add my recommendation to the one you had earlier for you to look at the Gemini Principles. Gemini is the clue. It's about twins, which was written by the Cambridge Centre for Digital Built Britain last November, and suggests a data structure and also a framework for moving forward. From the static asset model, which is quite useful as a digital twin for the simplest of things, to the fully automated operational twin, which is aware of its context, it's aware of its purpose, and is able to take actions. Now, some parts of the man-made world are already in that, but many are not. I mean, what's extraordinary is that we're decades now into the use of what you could now call digital twins in aerospace, and we're quite a few years into it in automobiles. And I saw something recently which said that the reason Apollo 13, if you remember Apollo 13 nearly 50 years ago, failed on its way to the moon and was rescued, brought back by improvising solutions to the problems that came up. The reason they were able to do that was they had a digital twin of the spaceship, and they could see and test and simulate all the possible options that they had, and the astronauts could then actually implement them. But because they had that, and that was 50 years ago, nobody called it a digital twin, but that's what it was. We've now got that same approach in aircraft design and operation and maintenance. And we have it now increasingly in cars. I have one of these Teslas now. It spooks me. It's got its life of its own. And it's reporting on everything I'm doing. And it downloads stuff if it chooses to. And it shows me what's going on all around. I can see half the West End and the traffic flows and everything else. It's set up to do an awful lot of things which I didn't ask for and which I possibly don't need. But it's incredibly competent. And the weird thing is that the cars like this only cost about twice as much per square meter as buildings do. And they also move. You know, so it's buildings are a very, very simple problem by comparison with either aerospace or cars. So we could catch up remarkably fast if we wanted to. So how might we do that? Well, one or two straws in the wind about how these various silos might be brought together. The first one, which I'm illustrating, is the idea of using a common data environment right through the life of an asset, not just for building it. This particular one, Ecodomus, is designed for that purpose, and it interfaces with all of the data flows during construction, but also during operation that you might conceive. It has interfaces with all of the major softwares, and it enables you to obviously connect the building automation system to the building information system and optimize the performance and actually look at the pumps and the fans and all the other pieces of work by going into the model and seeing the data that's flowing off the machinery. But it also enables you to look at the occupier's business data and say, is this building really supporting the occupier in the way that it should? Can we optimize that? I mean, the thing that comes off the Tesla and also off the jet airliner is that you don't just build it and then regret when you get the feedback that doesn't quite do what you want. You can tune it up. It's constantly improvable. It's a software-driven thing, and it downloads improvements constantly. That's what we can do. We can optimize our buildings after we've built them, in addition to making our best efforts when we're supposedly designing. So one or two other straws in the wind. Schneider, the electrical company, is working with Planon, which is a facility management software supplier that does integrated workspace management systems. So that's a silo crossing connection that they actually want to be able to control the building. That's a signal, is it? Yes. We have Trimble buying into similarly integrated workspace management system suppliers, assembling a broader group of companies that could work right across the silo. And finally, we have Siemens acquiring the Bentley software platform, which is really a big jump from a dominant electrical engineering company buying one of the founding BIM software houses. All of this is sort of attempts to build a system approach which would go right across and produce digital twin quality material. But I think one of the things we've got to recognize is that buildings enable occupiers, and occupiers have their own technologies for their own purposes. So we haven't just got the three original things. We've got whatever's going on in the building. and supporting the technology of that. So a hospital or a health centre is there to look after people and will use massive amounts of medical technology, and our building has to support that. And that medical technology will keep changing, probably quite rapidly, and we have to accept that that will occur, and that it has to be allowed for in the design of the building. Educational technology, again, a massive thing in itself. How does the property support that use, and how do we enable it to be continuously updated, because it will. Workplace technology particularly is evolving rapidly. Outfits like WeWork have systems to enable them to deliver the service that they offer. They want everything about the building so that they can optimize that, but they also want everything about their occupiers that they can possibly have. And last but not least, imagine an apartment building built to rent. The individual apartments will all have their own home automation, which the occupiers might fancy. You've got to support that. It will constantly change. It isn't actually the building systems, it's the occupiers' systems for their purposes. So the conversation between these is really quite an issue as to how we're going to support the data-driven world, not just the physical world. It's a very interesting period that we're now entering. There are no hard and fast answers. There's a lot to explore. There's lots of new technologies, 5G, blockchain, Internet of Things, all of which are going to contribute to this. So we're not talking about solutions now. We're just talking about doors opening. And what is a digital twin, and how will it work, and how will we get there, is the next great game in the next few years. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Richard, for that incredibly clear sort of explanation of digital twins and how all the different technologies fit together. That's terrific. Thank you. Any questions for Richard before we move on? No? Can I just ask, I mean, how fast do you think this is advancing? I mean, we've been talking about seemingly the Internet of Things for forever, but it still seems quite an abstract concept, really.
I think, well, I used to use a slide comparing BIM as the tortoise and smart technology as the hare.
Right.
BIM has been crawling forward for 20 plus years now, and is still moving at that sort of speed. Smart, on the other hand, is advancing extraordinarily rapidly. And almost all of the new buildings that are going up in central London now have a very high level of smart technology installed.
Okay.
22 Bishopsgate is going to be probably the most advanced, but the new headquarters of Deloitte at New Street Square is another one devoted to an organisation which has loaded the building up with sensors and management systems. This is moving so quickly that it distracts people from even knowing that there might be a connection between BIM and all this.
Right.
You know, so this is a building which will recognise the people coming through the door, will track them through the building, will enable you to have a meeting with whoever it was you wanted to meet because we know where they are. It'll know about the air quality in the conference room and whether it needs to be improved, and it won't ask people to do it, it does it itself. So a lot of things are being brought together, but they're not necessarily using the model in the way that we all think that facility managers will use the model. They're using the smart technology. So it's got its own trajectory, and it's moving very quickly.
Yeah.
BIM is basically going to be standing there watching the hare disappearing into the distance. But the hare does need to turn around and say, hey, if I don't know what my building is, how am I going to succeed? I only know some things about it. I must go back and help the tortoise.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that analogy. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.